So before I start today's video, I just wanted to make a pretty big disclaimer. So in this video, I keep calling this item the Playmate, but unfortunately the item is not called the Playmate. It's actually called the Playdate. So keep that in mind as you're watching this video. Again, the item is called the Playdate and not the Playmate. So keep that in mind. I'm fully aware of this. Now back to your regular scheduled program. So it looks like we're going to be getting a brand new handheld console. Now this handheld console is not coming from Sony or Nintendo, which are known to make handheld consoles. It's actually going to be from the devs behind Firewatch. If you ever played Firewatch, then you'll know that's a pretty good game. And the name of this console is going to be called the Playmate. Now when you look at the Playmate, I will have to agree with some people out there. This thing definitely looks like a kid toy from the yellow color that they're deciding to go with and the design of this thing. This thing really does look like a kid's toy, but apparently it's going to play video games just like any other handheld in video game history, so that's nice to know. And when we're actually talking about the design of this, it looks like your standard handheld experience. We're talking things like a traditional D-pad, B and A buttons, a screen on it. So it's going to play fairly simple to a lot of the experiences you played on a handheld video game before. So that's very interesting. But however, there is one thing that's going to make the Playmate actually stand out compared to all other handheld consoles in history. And I'm pretty sure no other handheld in history has actually had this feature. So the feature that makes the Playmate actually stand out from the competition is the fact that this thing is actually going to have a cranking system on me where you pretty much crank it like a jack-in-the-box. You actually heard me right, guys. There is going to be a crank system on it. Now take a look at some video on the internet about how this is actually going to be played. You can see that there's already some concepts and already some demos out there of this thing actually fully working. Now I'm very curious to see how well the cranking system is going to be implemented in the video games when it actually comes to this system. This could be a gimmick. I can definitely see that being a gimmick, or I can actually see this being very fun. It all just depends on how well the developers behind these games that are going to be on the Playmate, how well they implement the cranking system. That's the thing that's actually going to be very interesting about this system. If this was just your standard system that just had a normal gameplay like a D button, face buttons and things like that, and it played like a traditional Game Boy, I'd be less curious about this system. But just the fact that they are deciding to put a cranking system on this system altogether does pique my interest, and I'm very curious to see the future of this thing and see how well this thing is actually going to play. Now we don't actually have a real release date for this thing. We do have a ballpark to when this thing is coming out. Apparently this thing is going to be coming out next year in 2020, so don't expect it anytime in 2019. Unfortunately, if you're looking to get your hands on it, you are going to have to wait at least a year for this thing to come out. Again, we don't actually have a concrete release date for this thing. All we know is a 2020 release date, so we do know at least it is coming out next year, and this thing is a very interesting concept. The one downside to this thing is it's going to be in limited quantities only, so that means they're not going to be mass producing this thing. So if you want to buy this thing right when it's time to pre-order this thing, you're going to have to buy it as soon as possible if you want to get your hands on this brand new Playmate device. And on top of that, the one downside to this thing, besides it being in limited quantities, is the fact that this thing, when it comes out, is not going to be cheap at all, believe it or not. It's actually going to be about $150, and that's actually a lot for a brand new handheld console, especially when we don't know the quality of the games, when we don't know how well the crank is going to be implemented, we don't know overall the build quality or how fun the games are going to be. So you're pretty much risking your money when we're talking about video games, since this thing is going to be $150. This thing is not something you can just go out and buy with nothing to think about when you're trying to buy this system. I think you have to really think about it before you buy this system, and it's very expensive for what it is. Honestly, for some reason, looking at the concept of this device and looking at the crank on this device and looking at the price point that they're setting this device to be, around $150, I can definitely see this for some reason being a novelty item. I don't think everybody out there is going to want to buy this on day one, considering it's a brand new platform and considering its limited quantity and it's very expensive for what it is. That's already the territory where you can buy a 3DS, a 2DS, and you guys know Nintendo knows how to make quality games. So if you want to spend $150, for most people, if you don't already own something like a 2DS 2DS or a 3DS in the same price range, I would definitely say pull the trigger on one of those consoles instead of buying this Playmate where you're pretty much gambling your money. You don't know how well this thing is going to be. It's in limited quantities and things like that. It's a very risky purchase, but for somebody who doesn't really care and for somebody that wants something fresh and new in the video game industry, this may actually be for you because this is a very interesting concept when it comes to the cranking system and when it comes to the overall design of this thing. It's going to be very interesting when this thing actually finally rolls out. One thing you may be wondering is what type of games is this actually going to be playing. I do know for a fact that there is already one big developer on board when it comes to the Playmate. It looks like the devs behind Katamari, the Katamari series, looks like they are going to be on board when it comes to this Playmate, and they said they do want to support this system in the long run, so that's nice. We already have a pretty big dev on our hands, and it's not like some brand new dev that's coming over to the platform. It's a dev that's been making games for quite some time, so that's good. We do have a pretty secure dev right there, but then it looks like the way that games are actually going to be on this system, you're not going to be able to buy games for this brand new Playmate. It looks like the business model for this Playmate is going to be pre-installed games, and you're actually going to be getting games on a game-to-game basis, and it looks like they're going to be coming out in seasons. That's what the actual company says. So pretty much you're going to be getting one game per week installed on this Playmate, and that's how games are going to be delivered. You're not going to be going to any retail store and buying physical cartridges for this actual machine. They are going to be coming out to this machine weekly and things like that in seasons, and there is going to be quite a few games coming out for this brand new Playmate. But overall, this is a very interesting concept now that the devs behind Firewatch is making a system like the Playmate with the crank system and the overall design and the business model of not buying physical games for this thing pretty much being digital only overall. I'm very curious about this Playmate that is coming in 2020. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News signing out.